A judge declares a man innocent, then sends him to 10 years in prison anyway. Minutes later, the judge disappears inside the courthouse. No exits. No footage. No trace. The building locks down, and the wrong man is about to be taken away. What really happened inside that courtroom? Before this story begins, I need you to do something important. Subscribe, like this video, and stay until the very end, because what you're about to hear is one of the most disturbing courtroom mysteries you've probably never heard before. A judge declares a man innocent, then sends him to prison anyway. And minutes later, that same judge disappears. No struggle. No security alert. No exit footage. The most terrifying part? He never left the building. Tonight's story isn't about ghosts, conspiracies, or internet myths. It's about how power, fear, and silence can twist the very place designed to protect the truth. Inside a courthouse built to enforce justice, something happened that law enforcement still cannot explain, and the people who were there that day have learned never to speak about it. This is the story of Judge Caleb Hargrove, a courtroom packed with witnesses, and a man named Micah Rowan, whose life was destroyed by a sentence that should never have existed. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, the question won't be who took the judge. It will be why. Courtroom 3 had already relaxed before Judge Caleb Hargrove finished speaking. Micah Rowan stood beside his attorney, shaking so badly the cuffs on his wrists rattled against the defense table. The jury had returned only minutes earlier. After 6 days of testimony, the murder charge that could have buried him for life was finally over. Judge Hargrove adjusted his glasses and read the final line. The court accepts the jury's finding. The defendant is not guilty of homicide. A wave of noise rippled through the room. Micah's sister sobbed. A few reporters leaned back in relief. Then the judge paused. The silence felt heavier than the verdict itself. However, he continued, his tone suddenly flat, the court finds the defendant responsible for obstruction of justice and material interference in an active investigation. Micah looked up, confused. Under mandatory sentencing guidelines, Hargrove said, without blinking, this court imposes 10 years of imprisonment. The courtroom froze. The defense attorney stammered that obstruction had never been tried. The prosecutor stared at the bench, clearly unprepared. Even the bailiff hesitated before stepping forward. But Judge Hargrove had already struck the gavel. Micah Rowan, an innocent man, was led away in handcuffs. And from that moment on, everything inside that courthouse began to go wrong. By courthouse procedure, every judge had to log their departure before leaving the secured wing. Judge Caleb Hargrove never did. Less than 5 minutes after Micah Rowan was taken into holding, the clerk, Elena Parkhurst, waited beside the bench with the standard sentencing documents. The judge usually signed them immediately. It was routine, automatic, almost impatient. But the chair behind the bench was empty. At first, no one panicked. Judges stepped into chambers all the time. Sometimes they took private calls. Sometimes they cooled off after controversial rulings. Elena gathered the papers and walked toward the narrow hallway behind the courtroom. The judge's chamber's door was open. The lights were still on. His robe was draped neatly across the back of his chair. His briefcase sat beneath the desk, unlatched, with a legal pad sticking halfway out. What wasn't there was him. Elena checked the private restroom. Empty. She stepped into the adjoining conference room. Empty. She returned to the clerk station and quietly asked security to verify Judge Hargrove's badge scan. The response came back within seconds. No exit scan. No elevator access. No parking garage record. According to the system, Judge Caleb Hargrove was still inside the secured wing. But no one could find him. And then the lockdown was ordered. The announcement came over the internal speaker system, soft but unmistakable. Attention all personnel. This is a temporary security hold. Please remain in your current locations. Most people inside the courthouse assumed it was a drill, until the doors sealed. Heavy steel barriers slid down over the secured wing entrances, locking in court staff, clerks, 2 judges, 3 deputies, and one terrified legal intern named Rosa Kincaid, who had been standing in the hallway outside Judge Hargrove's chambers when the alarms chimed. Security Supervisor Marcus Feld took control of the surveillance room. Every camera covering the judge's corridor was pulled up on the wall monitors. The footage made no sense. At 11:42 a.m., Judge Hargrove walked out of Courtroom 3 and turned toward his chambers. At 11:43, he reached the hallway corner. At 11:44, the camera flickered. Just 1 second of static. Then the hallway was empty. No return movement. No alternate exit. No shadow passing the lens. Marcus rewound the clip 4 times. The judge never reached his office. He never crossed the far doorway. He never entered the stairwell. He simply stopped existing between 2 cameras that had no blind spot. And the deeper security searched the logs, the worse the truth became. Every door in that corridor had remained locked. From the inside. While security combed the locked wing, no one remembered the detail that would later haunt every investigator. Micah Rowan had never been charged with obstruction. Not once. Public Defender Darren Holt realized it while standing in the hallway outside the holding cells, replaying the judge's words over and over in his head. There had been no separate indictment. No secondary hearing. No jury instruction. Nothing in the trial even mentioned interference with the investigation. The sentence should have been legally impossible. Darren rushed to the clerk's office and demanded the digital case file. What he found made his hands shake. A new charge had been added to Micah's docket. Time-stamped at 11:41 a.m. 1 minute before the verdict was read. The charge wasn't entered by the prosecutor's office. It wasn't filed by court administration. It was uploaded under Judge Hargrove's judicial credentials. But the metadata revealed something else. The entry device was not the judge's workstation. It was a mobile terminal. One that did not exist in the courthouse inventory. Darren showed the screen to Elena Parkhurst. She whispered the question both of them were afraid to ask. If the judge didn't file it, then who did? Micah Rowan didn't know the judge had vanished. He only knew something felt wrong the moment the steel door slammed behind him. Deputy Lorne Beckett guided him into a holding cell near the secured wing, temporary overflow while transport paperwork was prepared. That alone was unusual. Prison transfers normally took hours. 10 minutes after he sat down, the wall phone rang. Micah stared at it. Holding cells were not allowed incoming calls. Beckett hesitated, then lifted the receiver from outside the bars. "Who is this?" he asked. The color drained from his face. He turned and slowly held the phone through the opening. "It's for you." Micah pressed the receiver to his ear. The voice was low, controlled, familiar. "Listen carefully," the man said. Micah's stomach tightened. It was Judge Hargrove. "You were not supposed to stay alive long enough to leave this building," the voice continued calmly. "Someone corrected a mistake I made 10 years ago. And now you are the evidence." Micah whispered, "Where are you?" A pause. Then one final sentence. "I never made it back to my chambers." The line went dead. Beckett stared at Micah as if he were looking at a ghost. And down the corridor, 3 security officers were already running toward the phone terminal. 10 years before Micah Rowan ever stepped into Courtroom 3, a teenager named Julian Crowell vanished during a corruption inquiry that quietly collapsed before it ever reached trial. The case had been sealed under judicial order. Signed by one judge, Caleb Hargrove. At the time, Julian's father worked as a contracted data technician for the county's digital records department. He had discovered a pattern, criminal files being altered after submission, charges downgraded, evidence logs quietly rewritten. Julian had copied part of the database onto a private drive. 2 days later, he disappeared on his walk home from school. No suspect was ever named. The inquiry was closed under insufficient evidence. What Darren Holt uncovered that night was the sealed file's internal audit. A list of names appeared in the modification history. Prosecutors, 2 senior administrators, and 1 junior systems engineer who now worked for a private courthouse software contractor. The same company responsible for maintaining the mobile terminals used by judges and deputies. The same terminals that did not officially exist. And at the top of the sealed order, Judge Caleb Hargrove, the man who had buried the first crime, and possibly uncovered the second. Security Supervisor Marcus Feld finally gave the order to sweep the maintenance corridors beneath the secured wing. Most courthouse employees didn't even know they existed. Rosa Kincaid was sent along because she had access credentials to archived blueprints. What she found in the digital plans didn't match the physical layout. There was an unmarked square beneath Judge Hargrove's hallway. No label. No usage description. Just a sealed architectural note, temporary system storage, Phase 2. The entrance was hidden behind a fire access panel in a service stairwell no longer in use. The lock accepted Marcus's master key. The door opened into a narrow concrete room filled with humming equipment racks and a single desk bolted to the floor. A laptop sat open. The screen showed a live courthouse database. On the desk lay Judge Hargrove's personal phone. Still powered on. Still unlocked. The last outgoing call had been placed 4 minutes earlier. To the holding cell terminal. But what froze everyone in place was the chair. It was tipped backward, and strapped to the floor beneath the desk were 2 steel restraints. One was still closed. The other was open. Rosa noticed it first. A blinking cursor in the corner of the laptop screen. The database wasn't idle. Someone was still logged in. Marcus leaned closer and read the user session tag at the top of the interface. It wasn't Judge Hargrove. It was a generic administrator shell, temporary access, automatically deleted after logout. The kind used during emergency maintenance. Except this one had been active for nearly 3 hours. Rosa scrolled. A list of case numbers filled the screen. All sealed. All modified. All tied to one internal classification label. Deferred resolution subjects. Marcus opened the first file. It belonged to a woman who had testified against a county contractor 12 years earlier. Her assault charge had been quietly reclassified. Her testimony flagged as unreliable. The second file was a former court translator who had reported evidence tampering. The third, Micah Rowan. But there was another name attached to his file. A hidden reference field. A second defendant entry that had never appeared in open court. Julian Crowell. 10 years apart. 2 cases linked by the same silent marker. Rosa whispered, "These aren't corrections." Marcus stared at the screen. They're control records. And whoever had created them was still somewhere inside the building. At 12:31 p.m., Transport Control radioed the holding wing. They were ready to move Micah Rowan. No one had requested them. Deputy Lorne Beckett checked the transfer order on his terminal. It was already approved. Digitally signed. Not by a judge. By the same emergency administrator shell Marcus had just found in the hidden room. Beckett stalled. He told dispatch the inmate wasn't cleared. 30 seconds later, his terminal refreshed. A priority override appeared. Immediate removal required. 2 armed transport officers arrived at the secured gate. Their badges scanned clean. Their uniforms were correct. But when Beckett quietly contacted internal security to verify their assignment codes, The response came back cold. Those officers did not exist in the county payroll system. Inside the control room, Marcus watched a service elevator activate on its own. The destination panel lit up for a level that wasn't publicly listed. A sub-basement beneath the maintenance floor. The same hidden square Rosa had found in the blueprints. Marcus understood too late. The room beneath the courthouse was never meant to hold servers. It was meant to move people. And Micah Rowan was being scheduled for the same kind of disappearance that had erased Julian Crowell 10 years earlier. Marcus Feld reached the secured gate just as the transport officers tightened their grip on Micah Rowan. He raised his weapon. "Stand down." They didn't. The taller officer spoke calmly. "This transfer is authorized under deferred resolution." The phrase sent a shock through Marcus's chest. Only one internal file used that wording. "Step away from the inmate," Marcus repeated. Behind them, the service elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Empty. Waiting. Before anyone could move, a sharp ringing cut through the hallway. Marcus's radio. The call came through on a restricted internal channel. A voice broke across the static. Hoarse. Strained. But unmistakable. "This is Judge Caleb Hargrove." The hallway froze. "They can't remove him," the judge whispered. "If he leaves the building, you lose the only leverage you have." Marcus shouted into the radio, "Where are you?" A breath. A quiet, painful exhale. "I was wrong 10 years ago. I helped hide it. I thought I was protecting the court." The voice cracked. "I didn't realize the system would learn how to protect itself." Then the line dissolved into dead air. At the same moment, every terminal in the secured wing flashed the same alert. Administrator session ended. The transfer order vanished. The two officers stepped back. And somewhere beneath the courthouse, something stopped watching. Before you click away, I want you to sit with this for a moment. A judge disappeared inside his own courthouse. A man was almost erased by a digital system designed to quietly rewrite lives. And the most frightening part of this entire story isn't the hidden room, the fake officers, or the sealed files. It's how easily it all worked. No masks. No violence in public view. No dramatic chase through the halls. Just approvals, logins, and silent overrides. If you believe stories like this matter, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. True crime isn't only about monsters in the dark. Sometimes it's about systems that learn how to decide who matters, and who can disappear without consequences. And if you stayed until the end, comment one word below, accountable. Because the real horror isn't what happened to Judge Caleb Hargrove. It's how many people like Micah Rowan and Julian Crowell may never even get a story told at all. This has been a true crime deep dive into power, silence, and the terrifying cost of letting systems run without question. See you in the next story.